Got a little unbox here. We got a package from Intellitronix. Nicely packaged. This is a future installment coming for the C10. And we got a full complement of gauges here. So here's what comes in the box. And we've got senders here. So we've got for the speedo, you've got this that'll turn your mechanical speedo into electronic signal. I won't be using that because this is on an LS swap, so we'll get that from the ECM. Got your temp sender, oil pressure sender. And you got an adapter there to 1/2-inch pipe for the, I would imagine that's for the oil pressure sender just in case, or maybe temp sender, I don't know. Probably temp sender, thinking about it. Won't be using that either. What I did buy was this piece here, this package. They offer this separate, and this is for LS install. And it's got a temp and a oil pressure sender in there. So you can adapt to those metric threads. In here, these are the plexiglass for the gauges. You'll use your factory bezel, and you'll use the cup or the housing for the gauges, and you'll take the gauges out. You know, and there's instructions for that. Instructions are right here. Here's the gauges, and wiring is just basically soldered in, and then you've got your terminals there. It looks like we have calibration buttons, which we'll run through somewhere on the dash. 4-gauge pack, so we'll have temp, oil pressure, the fuel sender, and volts. So that's all there, and this was a non-tachometer vehicle, so over here it had speedometer, and it had a huge gas gauge, fuel level gauge, so now that will be the tachometer, which is nice. So oil, volts, water temp, fuel level, tachometer, speedometer. And they're laid out, these circuit boards right here kind of stack on top of each other, and they have a pass-through between the two boards. So basically what you're wiring up is 3 separate circuit boards, so you got to power all 3 of them. And I've just got a set of jumper leads, and we're going to hook all 3 of these powers, which would be, they would all 3 lead to ignition volts. So we're going to temporarily just put alligator clips on them to hold them all together. I also put flags and labeled all of these, so that way just to lessen the confusion as you're fighting through a dash and things of that sort. Like I said, this is just temporary, so we can hook power and ground to it. And you can see they go through a gauge sweep. Tells us that we've got 6,000 RPM and it's on 8-cylinder. So we're doing an LS, so we'll go through the instructions later, and we'll switch that to a 4-cylinder because an LS has 4-cylinder signal. And that's just when you fire it up. I'm sure that when you turn the key on, this is what it's going to look like, and then when you start it, your tach's going to read because it's going to get a signal in. Board fires up, so that's good news. And like I said, this just eliminates any problem of, is it my wiring, is it the board, or you got a bad ground, things of that sort. And that can happen with anybody, professional, the amateur, whatever. So this, step 1, bench tested, check. So today we're going to be installing a set of gauges from Intellitronix. And this set of gauges is designed to fit 73 to 87 Chevy square bodies, the truck that everybody loves. So first off, we're going to start with the tools that we're going to use to test a few things. So I got my handy dandy power probe. If you don't have one of those, you better get one. That's a phenomenal tool right there, and I'm just going to hang it in there. We've got a multimeter, and as long as you have a quality multimeter, you're good. And then a set of jumper wires so we can kind of test some things. We're going to start off now with pulling the gauge out. Come on in here and check it out. So to pull it off on these, all you need is a Phillips head screwdriver. We'll get all these screws out of here, and this should come apart into 2 pieces where we have this lower fascia, and then the upper gauge cluster piece will come off. So these Intellitronix gauges, I did quite a bit of research when I was digging around on the interwebs for my gauges I picked for this. And the first thing that grabbed me from Intellitronix is made in USA. You contact them, they're in Ohio, and I was real happy with that, which anyone who's American should be. I start looking at them a little more, and then I look at the price, and they're one of the less expensive gauge packages out there. And they've got a lot of different options and a lot of different ways to set these up. So always remember, guys, as you're pulling this stuff apart, this one is a fairly new bezel in this older truck, but this plastic can be so brittle. Just be careful. Y'all can make fun of my old man glasses if you want to, but I'm gonna need them to see what I'm doing here. So this gauge set uses a portion of this cluster. Out of here, there we go. Okay. Now, cluster's out. So there's that. We're there. And now we'll work on disassembling that here in the next step. Cluster's out. Now we're going to disassemble it and get it ready for the new gauges. And these are self-tapping screws, so they just thread into plastic. They should come right out. Make sure you drop a few on the ground and lose them. Okay. Done good. I didn't break none of that part. Oh, there we go. Shift indicator off. We'll keep those screws together. Now, here we go. Now we've got the outer bezel piece off of there. Then each gauge is screwed in individually. You could actually, back in these days, you could replace the gauges individually. These screws we need to hang on to because the new gauge cluster will attach with those. See how those gauges, they just kind of unplug. They went into those contacts. Now we'll hang on to those and put them in a box for this guy. All of the indicators as well are built into this new cluster setup. There we go, fuel gauge. Now we'll flip this over because the speedometer, yep, we got this clip back here, and we're not going back with a mechanical speedometer, so we don't need that. Set that off to the side. And then this is the kind of stuff you used to do all the time when I first got in the business, and I never mess with it anymore. So all you old guys can yell at me how I'm doing it wrong. Okay, and now that gauge box is stripped out and we're set. So this portion right here, what we're going to do, this is the small gauge side where we have fuel, oil, temp, and volt gauge. And it's two separate circuit boards here. And you get these number 4 machine screws. You put a nylon washer on. Then you put them through the upper circuit board here, like so. Hopefully you can see that. Sorry, didn't mean to bump the camera. Then you put a spacer on, then you set them through like so. And let's get the other side done here. We do a wash, rinse, repeat. We'll get them both on. Okay. And then you drop this bad boy on like so. Try to get in here where I can see it. There we go. And that's how it sets, like that. So it kind of spaces it up, as you can see. And then what we'll do is you put the nuts on the back side with another washer. Okay, now you drop another nylon washer on here on each side. And then number 4 nut. We'll snug those up. You got a small Allen wrench. We'll just snug them up real lightly at first here. This isn't a cylinder head you're torquing down. You want to get them just snug. So in my world, I call that monkey fisting. So don't monkey fist it. And there you go. So that's assembled. I'll double check there's nothing else, but it sets in here very, very nicely. Everything routes nice and easy. I think there might be one stand you have to trim, but we'll come back to that in a second. So right here, these two stands, if this is the top, this stand and this stand are too tall. So what you have to do is trim them down about an inch. So that's roughly about the height of the rest of those. So I'm going to use a cutoff wheel. If you don't have that, a razor blade would probably cut through them, or a small knife, utility knife. And there we go. Yeah, now she lays flat. We're going to route the wiring straight through the speedometer hole. The speedometer is now electronic, so you don't have to worry about that. So there you go. Now we've got speedometer and tachometer portion. We're going to drop this into the bezel here. We'll pull these through here again. That's a lot of wiring through one small spot, especially now that I got my little flags on there. But I promise you, you will thank yourself for that later when you get into confined spaces. And I tell you, the fit of this is real nice. It sits in there exactly what you'd expect it to. So one thing we'll have to do is, we had nothing right here because we had a giant fuel level gauge here. So we're going to have to trim that out. So I'm going to take a razor knife and trim that out. And be careful, because this thing, you ruin it and you know, you're going to spend a whole lot of money on a piece of plastic. And guys, this kind of stuff is pretty common with aftermarket type items. And I'm going to say this, if you're afraid to do something like this, you're probably on the wrong truck. Because owning an old truck, you kind of end up doing a lot of stuff and kind of fabbing stuff together and making things. There we go, guys. Not a bad look. So we'll get everything kind of snapped into place. So let's get a move on. We're going to do something a little bit different, because every vehicle you do, doesn't matter if it's the same model, things are manufactured a little bit different over the years. So we're going to go ahead and just put the screws directly in here. And we're going to forego using this clear factory acrylic lens because of just some fitment issues that we ran into. So there it is, all fit. We're going to throw the gear selector back on. But just to tell you guys, this gauge kit with all the gauges is about the same price as a tack kit, where they change this one to a tack and you put your fuel gauge over here. That kit alone is roughly the same amount as all of this. So I would say you get a way, way better deal. The last step we're going to do is put the smoked lenses on, and I'm going to do that once the gauge cluster's sitting in the dash. That way you don't knock them around or scratch them or anything like that, and just to kind of keep things safe. Let's step over here to the truck. Okay, here's something that's going to be real helpful on this install. You want to make sure that you ohm out your gauges where you see from sending units up into the cab, which I'll get in there in a minute and show you. But we've got those jumper wires I showed you. I got one hooked up to where the gauge feeds into the cab. This should be the factory wiring, where it feeds in. So this wire, second one over, right here. Factory, it's a pink wire, which you can see someone's replaced this pigtail, but it's a pink wire, and we're gonna see if we've got continuity and which wire it's at. Okay, first thing we wanna do is we're gonna put our meter into continuity here. So a lot of them, it looks like a little horseshoe like that. I'm actually gonna put it in this one because it will have an audible tone. It will beep when the leads touch together. Right here, we had the red lead on my jumpers hooked onto the fuel sending unit. So I'm gonna clip that onto one side of the lead right here, like so. Then we're gonna hop in the truck. Here's our factory gauge connector. What we're gonna do is we're gonna touch each one of these. And when we hear a beep, there's our wire. So third one over, you can see when I touch that one. So that's our fuel gauge sending unit. So we know that's where we want to hook that wire up to the new gauge cluster. We're going to do the same thing here. We're looking at the back of the motor, and I've got a wire dropped down in here. I've already pre-made my harness. That is the oil pressure. And then routed over here is my temperature sender. So we've got both of those run, and we're going to hook this wire first to the oil pressure sending unit. So that is hooked to the oil pressure sending unit wire, and I've already double checked in, and I wired it into the factory harness right here and right here. Now, if your harness isn't hacked up like this truck was, they will actually, your temperature sending unit will be on this side of the head, your oil pressure sending unit will be on the back of the block, real similar to an LS. So let's go inside, test for continuity. Go through until we hear a tone. There it is. And we're hooked up. Let's go through this, see if we can find that temp wire. Look at that, first try. First try, excellent. There we go, good tone. We're gonna switch to our power probe, and what we're looking for now is turn signal lights. So we're gonna turn the key on, put the left turn on here. So you'll hear a tone like that where it's blinking with the power. Oh, come on. Tone's deceiving, but here's what I've got, and you can see it's bouncing around like that, going from 0, and it's bouncing back up. It's just not responding fast enough. A test light, if you have a test light, it's just going to blink on and off. So that's our left turn right there. Repeat that for the right turn. Here we are, we've got our ignition power. That's the pink and black. Keyed on, you can hear it. It goes to ignition volts. Off. It disappears. It goes to a ground, but that's just how the circuit's built. Okay, we're going to talk a quick second about the sending units and the adapters for the LS. Before I installed the sending unit, I went ahead and I put the ground wire on it. You got 2 wires on this. One side says G, one says S. Ground, sender. Sender goes to the gauge, ground goes to ground. You got 2 adapters in the LS install kit. One's for the oil pressure sender, it's the larger of the 2, and one's for the temperature sender. And you can see these the senders just thread right into those. Now, you won't be able to really see how this is installed because of how it is. Both of them are metric thread, and they have washers that go underneath them. So these washers go onto the sender to seal them. I'll show you where they install. So this adapter we have to put in goes right behind the intake into that hole right there. That's where the factory sending unit would go. And then we'll put that adapter in. Okay, there's the adapter in. So now we'll get the sending unit put in there. Okay, fellas, something that's real common is a aftermarket sending unit is bigger diameter by a long shot than the factory sending unit. So something that I do, you have to do this with Autometer, you got to do it with any gauge out there. They're just this way, especially the way that's designed. What'll happen is it'll hit on the cam sensor right there. Also, it will hit on that bolt for the valley cover right there. So you can't get around it. So you take this stand, it's a 2-inch piece of 1/8" pipe thread and an 1/8" pipe coupler. Here we go, sending unit is in. And that ground wire rolls over to that side. I set it up that way on purpose. If you go over to this side of the intake, the passenger side, that is a main ground. You need a 13mm, and you can undo that ground. You can hook that wire from the sending unit right to there. Perfect spot for it. Here is where I installed the coolant sending unit. I put it on the back head on the passenger side, the back of the head. There's a fitting there. There's also a fitting over here on the front of the driver's side, but that's where the factory sender goes. So back here, you pull the plug out, the factory plug, you put the adapter in and put your sender in, and that's it. Same as kind of the oil pressure. So we got the gauge cluster ready to install, and I've done a little bit of pre-work here. On the vehicle, we went ahead and traced the wiring down with a schematic, as well as checking continuity with some of the wires just to verify. Let's go ahead and start on the install. And as we do, remember, you had basically 3 separate circuit boards. One for the speedometer and tachometer, one for the upper gauges, one for the lower gauges. So you're going to have 3 grounds, 3 ignitions. Just remember that. And speaking about the grounds, do not ground to this factory ground in here. This is something that Intellitronix spoke to them personally, as well as they mention it in their instructions. Find a good engine block ground, which I have already pulled out of the harness under the hood. So right here, we have a wire that comes from the computer, and that's for the check engine light. Anybody see it? Oh, there, CEL, check engine light. And on each of these, we just want to go through, do a good quality crimp. This will become quicker and quicker each connection you make, because you'll have less and less. Okay, something if you're doing your LS swap, this kit I would recommend. Intellitronix sells it, and honestly it was the cheapest all-in-one out there, so I went ahead and bought it when I got the gauges. So this kit has both adapters for the oil pressure sender, for the temp sender, and it has a resistor for the tachometer, which is for a pickup on the tachometer. You get a weak signal, which is a 5-volt reference basically for an LS, and an aftermarket tach almost always needs a full 12 volts. So what you've got is you've got a resistor you wire in between the ignition source and the tach signal. So we're going to tie this in between here, and we're going to twist one end around the tach wire. And this way you can solder, you can get fancy, you can do whatever you want, but this will work perfectly fine. This one goes on one end like so, and we're going to crimp that. And then over here, we're going to get another butt connector, and I'm going to twist this around the ignition source here. And when I'm all done, I will tape this up so it's good and insulated. We'll twist this. And so you can see that resistor goes between the tachometer wire and the ignition source wire. So what that does is give it an extra boost in power, but going through that resistor, it won't pop any fuses or overload any circuits. Here's our tach wire coming in from our ECM. Now that'll go over here to the white tach wire, and that will get the tach signal into the cluster correctly. Lastly, this will wire your ignition in, and it will also finish up wiring the tach. And now going forward, we've got everything already listed, already put together, and You've got your right turn signal, left turn signal, your high beam indicator, your dimmer, which is your dash lights, the brake light, the grounds, and the rest of the ignitions. So I'm going to get those hooked up and then we'll go through a test. Fuel gauge settings are right here. There's a switch set up. So what we've got is this second one down GM. So that's 0 to 90 ohms all the way up until, man, I don't remember when they literally went to that 0 to 90 ohm forever. So that's switch to the left up, switch to the right down. There's your fuel gauge. Up. This one. Down that one. Okay. That should be our settings for a 0 to 90 ohm. Up on the left, down on the right. Okay, we're going to go through tachometer settings. And it's got two buttons that come off the circuit board. One of them's for the tach, one of them's for the speedometer. And let's go ahead and set this tach what it's going to read to. They come set at 6,000, but what I'm going to do is go to 6,500. Gives a little buffer on there. And that's kind of where I like them to read. Wow, look at that. Spot on. Okay. 4-cylinder is what I've got it set on, and the 4-cylinder mode is what a LS tach reads. So let's shut it off. That should take it out of program mode. Now let's see what we got. That's pretty accurate. And again, this engine just got swapped. It's not tuned. So I like that. We're good. Okay, that's programmed. Right, wiring is all buttoned up and we've got everything in here. I'm just going to set the dash in here and throw the smoke covers on and take a look at what we got. That'll get us for now. And here, let's just key on. Everything powers. That's nice. When we turn the lights on, you see it kind of dim. You go brighter and dimmer, so the dimmer works. Left turn, you can see the indicator here. Right turn, we're over here. And let's get her set kind of in place here. I think this is probably going to look pretty stinking sharp. Top one. Did I put that on the wrong side? No. No, there it is. Whoa, don't stick it. Don't stick it. Oh, it's got to be over some. Oh yeah. That's a nice look. That honestly is a real nice look. The tach isn't calibrated yet, but we'll at least get a signal and kind of get an idea of what's going on with it. Oh. There we go. That's a wrap on that part.